we begin the discussion on an issue making headlines. After weeks of verbal and military aggression towards South Korea, North Korea has shown more restraint. However, it remains skeptical on holding a third summit with the United States. South Korea, meanwhile, is pushing for a resumption of U.S. North Korea talks. But will it be enough to break the more than year-long impasse? To discuss this, we have joining us Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Reader of International Relations at King's College London and Career Chair of the Freedom University in Brussels. We also connect with Joseph Bosco, former China Country Director of the U.S. Office of Secretary of Defense and contributor to The Hill. Now, my first question to you, Dr. Pacheco Pardo. Seoul is pushing for the resumption of U.S. North Korea talks, but U.S. Special Representative Stephen Biegun said last week that he believes another summit is unlikely before the November election, citing COVID-19 as the reason. How high is the North Korea issue on America's priority list right now? And do you think this proposed summit could happen within that time frame?
Well, I think that clearly North Korea is not top of the agenda for the Trump administration. Is dealing with China, at the domestic level with the coronavirus, obviously. The elections are coming up. Having said that, this is one of the issues in which President Trump could actually try to reach a deal with the other country, in this case North Korea, and present this as a success of his foreign policy before the election, because I think a breakthrough on other issues is very unlikely. And we have seen with President Trump, he likes to give us surprises. So 1 year ago, he actually went to the DMZ and met with Chairman Kim Jong-un, right, which was completely unexpected. So we cannot say this is not going to happen for sure. If it was any other president, we could say this. But with President Trump, I think this could still happen.
So you're not counting out the possibilities there. Well, what about you, Dr. Bosco? Do you think there could be this October surprise?
Well, I don't know how much of a surprise it would be for the president to meet with Kim Jong-un, since he's already met with him 3 times. If this were the first time, then that would be, quite an amazing news-making event. But it's getting to be almost routine now that he's met with them 3 times. They haven't made significant progress since Singapore, when they appeared to, at least in concept, have an agreement as to denuclearization. But no, I don't think there's a high chance of a meeting. If they really were an October surprise, it would be the president going to Pyongyang or Kim Jong-un coming to the United States. I don't think either one of those is very likely.
Well, the regime's Foreign Minister Choi Son-hui has scoffed at the idea of a third U.S. North Korea summit. Dr. Pacheco Pardo, do you think that the South can convince the United States and North Korea to get on board? And reading between the lines, is North Korea actually angling for a summit?
I think eventually North Korea will want to have a summit with the U.S., whether it is with President Trump before the election or whoever wins the election in November. North Korea needs a summit, among other things, because otherwise it's not going to get sanctions relief. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible to reach a deal with the U.S. And move forward with its programs of economic reforms that they want to implement. I think that South Korea can play the role of trying to find an agreement between North Korea and the U.S., but I think that we have seen with President Trump that he doesn't care too much about allies. He doesn't care about South Korea, Japan, or European allies. So ultimately, I think this will be a decision taken by President Trump himself. I don't think even his administration, but the president himself, because he likes to take decisions without much consultation from what we know. So I think that South Korea can play this role, trying to find an agreement that is satisfactory to both of them. But at the end of the day, will be President Trump deciding whether he wants to sign a deal with North Korea for his own domestic purposes.
Well, Dr. Bosco, what do you think? I mean, Stephen Biegun suggested that a pre-election summit might be unlikely, but he did add that there's still time to make substantial progress. So what would you count as this substantial progress, and how do you think Seoul should coordinate talks between the two sides?
I think substantial progress would be for North Korea to present an accounting of exactly what it has in terms of nuclear weapons and missile development. Otherwise, we don't have a starting point by which we could measure progress. We've been around this dilemma for decades now, and that's always the starting point. What do they have? And we measure against that what they actually would reduce or destroy. as far as the role of South Korea itself, I think there's a problem in the United States, a perception that President Moon and his team are perhaps a little bit too eager to make concessions to North Korea in order to get a deal. And so you have some kind of pushback within the U.S. negotiating team, and they want to deal directly with North Korea, and they are not willing to make the kinds of concessions that they believe that President Moon wants them to make.
Well, Dr. Pacheco Pardo, in the meantime, North Korea claims that it's had no coronavirus cases, but the ruling party's Politburo has had serious discussions over the issue, and its newspaper 노동신문 said recently that there should be maximum obedience over the handling of the virus. How serious do you think the COVID-19 situation is there, and how much impact is it having on the economy?
Obviously, without knowing what's going on inside North Korea, we do know there have been credible reports coming out of the country, for example, the Daily NK, suggesting that there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of cases. Economically, I think we can assume that North Korea is not doing well. We know that the border with China, for the most part, has been closed since the coronavirus situation started in January. We have images from the border, and many days there have been no crossings across between North Korea and China, so there has been limited trade, and this is the main trade route that North Korea has with the rest of the world. We have also reports coming out of Pyongyang from foreign diplomats living there that freedom of movement has been restricted, that the economic situation doesn't seem to be as good as it was before of the coronavirus situation. For example, some shortages of some products in Pyongyang, and we're talking about the richest city in the country. So we can assume that North Korea is suffering from the coronavirus situation, and that this is one of the reasons why North Korea might be willing to sign some sort of deal with the United States in the coming months to try to alleviate the situation.
Well, Dr. Pacheco Pardo, expanding on that, how do you think that the economic impact of COVID-19 is going to affect Pyongyang's actions and policies towards the United States and South Korea as well?
I think it has already had an impact. Insofar, it is true that North Korea 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, it was raising tensions with South Korea, but we have seen this de-escalation, and we have seen, even when Chesongi was talking about not wanting to give in to United States pressure, she did mention the normal line from Pyongyang that if the U.S. removes its so-called hostile policy towards North Korea, Pyongyang might be willing to reach a deal. So I think this indicates that North Korea will want to sign a deal with the United States involving sanctions relief, even if it's only for a number of weeks or a number of months, to be able to improve its economic situation.
And Dr. Bosco, how do you think the economic impact of COVID-19 on North Korea is going to affect its policies towards the United States and China?
Well, I would hope that it would take a fresh look at the proposals that the United States has made to North Korea to provide economic aid, particularly during this time of pandemic, because the path to real progress lies there in that proposal, that the U.S. will provide tremendous economic aid to North Korea if it will start making progress on stating, its inventory of nuclear weapons and missiles, and start developing a program to reduce them. I should mention, though, that the reason I'm not so optimistic that Kim would agree to another summit is he was pretty much embarrassed after the Hanoi summit broke down and President Trump walked away from a deal. I think that Kim felt that he had been, abandoned right at the altar, in effect, and they never even had the luncheon. So he's been burned by meeting with the president and not having success, and I think he will be extremely skeptical about meeting again unless he gets some ironclad guarantees ahead of time, which, of course, is also the reverse of the U.S. position. The U.S. wants guarantees that there will be progress before they will meet again.
Well, Dr. Bosco, North Korea meanwhile, has been seeking stronger ties with China in recent weeks. How do you see this playing out over the next weeks and months?
Well, it seems that that's a strange development in their relationship. It's gone up and down in the last several months. I think when at the beginning of Trump's overtures toward North Korea, there seemed to be some real progress being made, and then China intervened, summoned Kim to Beijing, and at that point, the attitude of the North Koreans toward the negotiations hardened, and they went back to their original, very hostile rhetoric. Then Trump and Kim had their summits, and it seemed after Singapore that there would be some real progress. But as we said, the Hanoi development collapsed, and they've gone back to recriminations. China's role in it is, I think, a curious one. They have said, for the record, many times that they oppose North Korea's nuclearization program, and yet they continually protect North Korea from the worst level of sanctions, and even those that are imposed are then subverted and undermined by China's trade across the border. Now, with the pandemic, of course, that, as our other guest has indicated, that border has been closed, and there's not the kind of flow of economic aid to North Korea from China. Perhaps that's the reason North Korea is trying to warm up to China now, to get them to resume the flow of really illegal aid that is violating the sanctions regime.
Well, Dr. Pacheco Pardo, before we go, South Korea is trying to push for these third round of talks to happen between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. How do you think it should coordinate such efforts, and how do you think there can be some kind of progress made between the two sides?
I think the issue here is that President Trump has shown that he doesn't consider the views of his allies. I think what South Korea can do, it can keep pressing for engagement, because it is the policy of President Moon. He was elected on this platform, and he will continue to do so until he leaves office in a year and a half, a couple of years. And we shouldn't forget that candidate Biden recently said that he was for principal engagement, but the key word here was engagement, which means that he would be willing to consider some other type of engagement with North Korea, probably taking into consideration South Korea and other allies, probably involving human rights as well. So I think that for South Korea, it makes sense to continue to press for engagement over the next few months, even if it doesn't sit at the table with North Korea and the U.S. Let's see what happens in November. If there's a change in president in the United States and there's more engagement, probably South Korea will be in the table with the other two. If President Trump is reelected and an agreement is reached eventually, well, South Korea will play a role because it will be one of the main providers of economic support for North Korea. So it makes sense to keep pressing for this type of policy.
Well, North Korea and probably President Trump as well, being as unpredictable as they are, we'll have to wait over the next weeks and months to come to see what really happens there. But we have to wrap up the discussion here, I'm afraid. But that was Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Reader of International Relations at King's College London, and Joseph Bosco, former China Country Director in the U.S. Office of the Secretary of Defense. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is also where we wrap up the show. Thank you for watching.